Hi, good morning. My name is Zhen, also known as Peter. I'm an associate professor in infrastructure, economy, and finance at UCL Pilot School. Today's presentations will be on a topic called resilient infrastructure, urban regeneration, and sustainable financing. And I will be presenting the first part of this particular topic, and the second part will be presented by Kai Beilin, who is a PhD student at the Pilot School. So the key structure of my presentation, there are four parts. I'll be speaking about the first two parts, which is resilient infrastructure. I'll be starting with a definition of resilient infrastructure and why is it important for modern urban development and how to build a resilient city. The second part is looking at digital city and the implication of urban digitalization, how to finance infrastructure, and also the importance of infrastructure investment as an alternative asset class. The third and the fourth part will be focusing on climate change, green finance market, and also the rising sea level, the implication for coastal infrastructure resilience. So this last two parts will be presenting by Kai Bei. Starting with resilient infrastructure, there are two ways that we define resilient infrastructure. In a narrow sense, we would like to define resilient infrastructure as the ability of the infrastructure system, including the interconnected ecosystems and social system, to absorb disturbance and still retain their basic function and structure capacity. So this is, as you can see, is a focus on durability. In a broader sense, is about sustainability, ecological and human inclusiveness, as well as adaptabilities. I think the last two are being very important, and I have shared with the organizer paper that we have been developing since last year, which is looking at ecological and human inclusiveness. The issues about adaptability is also very important, particularly in regard to climate change and also in regard to the broader kind of coastal defense system. The World Bank defined the ability of infrastructure system as a system to function and meet users' needs during and after a natural hazard. So investment in resilient infrastructure provide a pathway for countries to achieve better health, education, and livelihood. The financial benefit is mitigating the rising cost of equity capital in the long run and the risk of bankruptcy, where expected cash flow for major and unexpected events are insufficient to cover debt. So normally in infrastructure finance, we use debt service coverage ratio. So which is basically how much of the operating cash flow from infrastructure project is able to cover the debt if it's a public-private partnership, or from the point of view of public procurement, or from the point of view of governance, this will be government's fiscal budget. How much of this will be able to service the existing facility? Now, just to give you a personal example, I come from a place called Xiamen, and which is located in the southeast coast of China. I've been observing the coastal defense in Xiamen city. And last year, when I was in Xiamen University, we have a lot of inflooding through this drainage pipe. And from roughly the time I was growing up in Xiamen, 1980s, the coastal defense mechanism has been increasing probably around between 5 to 10 meters. So that's quite a significant cost to the city in terms of maintaining the infrastructure, and also with the existing infrastructure. As many of you know, that coastal China, particularly places like Xiamen, which is a special economic zone, there is a lot of construction, not only just from the point of economic development, but it's also part of the broader kind of city identity as a tourism, being one of the major revenue for the city, but also in terms of the other aspect of the infrastructure, which is connecting the city proper, which is an island, to the mainland, and with the increasing urbanization sprawling out of the small Xiamen Island to Tong'an and the surrounding region. So why do we need resilient infrastructure? If we look at some of this design, I mean, obviously we have a lot of well-developed infrastructure such as BRT, and this is a picture on the left. That's a BRT station. I think one of the issues with the existing design is about the question about upgrading those designs, and in particular, if you look at the BRT station or many tube station, which was built over 20 years ago, we only see the lift that take you, the elevator to take you up the station, but we don't have anything to take people down. And as you can see, it could be quite a long road for people who are much older, and to negotiate a kind of, if you like, the aspect of human inclusiveness. And London, of course, is having infrastructure such as London Metropolitan, London Underground for well over 160, 170 years, and they have managed to upgrade that infrastructure, that 160, 70 years infrastructure, by building lift and providing what we call accessibility. So in our systems of infrastructure, although China generally has generated a lot of infrastructure in the last 2 decades, particularly since the great financial crisis, and a lot of investment go into that, railroad, and also the urban transport system. The issue is to make those infrastructure of the future more resilient in the sense of inclusiveness, so that you provide greater amount of the accessibility for all sorts of users as China gets older and there's more aging population. And that is quite a substantial task, because that's also about upgrading a large part of infrastructure that is existing. And as you can see from most of the developed countries, this has been done. They do not have new stock of infrastructure investment finance, but a lot of investment go into maintenance of those infrastructure. I think the issues with the existing problem, I think, is being tackled by the government to a large extent, but we will need to rethink how we actually combine existing with a new infrastructure, and how to make those infrastructure more resilient and ecologically more sustainable. So just to talk about something that many of you are probably familiar, which is digitalization of cities, or sometimes known as digital twin or urban digitalization. Cities are becoming bigger and denser in the area of unprecedented urbanization. So at the same time, large-scale mobile data layers exist on top of those dense environments. So many of you probably heard of this new infrastructure, or 新基建, that was probably came around about 2 or 3 years ago, which is about basically promote intelligent upgrading and intelligent development of the city. So at one level, it's dealing with all those data generated by city, and also in terms of the potential to combine the existing infrastructure with the infrastructure that is being built, so to make them more integrated. And that is very important. New infrastructure, essentially, that in the current issue we're editing or journal, is an essential factor of production in the digital economy. And those data input and output help to make the city more resilient, achieve industrial optimization and other sustainable development goals. So what we see is the digitalization or new infrastructure, if you like, the infrastructure that is considered as the backbone of the new economy, will need to be integrated with the existing infrastructure, and particularly in upgrading the current city and urban infrastructure, to utilize those infrastructure to integrate with existing city, and also making it more inclusive. And those are the area that in the middle that you see, which will integrate the two aspects of infrastructure: the energy conservation, advanced rail transit, extra high voltages, power transmission line, distribution, underground space, construction, airspace, and marine engineering. And I think they converge particularly in the city-urban infrastructure. So 城市基建, those areas that need to be kind of developed and integrated. As an asset class, from the investment side, the infrastructure investment is a lot more resilient. And as an asset class, as many of you, like China, this year launched about 9 risks real estate investment trusts, and those risks will be able to provide for a large part of this used to be government spending and fiscal spending utilizing secondary market and developing infrastructure as an asset class. Overall, globally, infrastructure return has been very stable, and it's also, has less volatility compared with the stock market. And so it's essentially finding this very useful and very, if you like, booming domestic equity market and provide finance for the infrastructure tomorrow. There are short run and long run risk factors when we're talking about finance. So for example, from a debt perspective, since the start of COVID, we see that most of this infrastructure, particularly toll road globally, are under these issues of increasing costs, but also increasing chance of default. Generally, historically, the DSCR, which is a ratio we use to measure the coverage of debt, is about 1.2. Post the COVID-19, this ratio fall below 1, which means that it's very hard to cover those interests in the time of the crisis. But also the gap is getting bigger. So equity financing versus debt financing, the gap globally is getting bigger. Not just developing countries, but also developed countries, and that financial shortages, as in the context of China, which I think the Chinese government has done particularly well, is to use equity financing, such as REITs. So I will end here, and I'll pass it on to Kai-Fei to finish the second part of the presentation. Kai-Fei, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. I'm just trying to share my screen. Yeah. So I think you can see my screen now.
Yes.
So basically, Dr. Ye has covered our topic on resilient infrastructure and digital cities, and also financing for those resilient infrastructure. And for me, I'm going to talk more about how climate change will have impact on the infrastructure financing. I remember last guest speaker has talked about that China is joining. Is bring up the 碳中和 topic. So he talked about 碳中和 in a very technical perspective. So about what we as an infrastructure financing perspective, we are more thinking of how we are going to fit in the gap between the needs for the financing project and the shortage. So as we can see from this diagram, that we can see it's not only in China but also globally, there's a trend that there is increasing demand for new infrastructure. However, there is a big financial shortage, and then we can see the gap is widened. So normally, there are two ways for financing the infrastructure project. One is the equity financing and also the debt financing. From the equity part, the very innovative idea for Chinese government to finance the infrastructure project is that last year we start to promote China infrastructure REITs to try to finance the project in terms of equity way. And also globally, lots of projects are financing through the green bonds, which now currently is very popular. So from this PowerPoint, you can see that after 2015 till now, after the Paris Agreement, every country around the world, they are taking actions, try to participate into this trend, try to decrease the carbon emission, and building new infrastructure or upgrading the current old infrastructure which might be polluted, to upgrade the old infrastructure is a very key point to help us to achieve the reducing the carbon emission. And in this part, we can see that the global green bonds issuance is actually growing very fast, starting from 2016 to 2020, and is predicting to keep growing with an annual rate of 12%. And I have a small picture here. You might not be able to read it, but we have that in our article, showing that Chinese governments, we are also proposing the green bonds, try to issue more green bonds and try to promoting the green bonds market starting from 2015. And there are lots of legislations in this topic try to regulate it, the market, and the market is actually attracting lots of investors. And then my last topic is about the cause of waterlogging, and how do we solve the waterlogging problem. So the waterlogging problem is actually not only a natural causes, too much rain. It's not caused by too much rain or windstorms. It's actually a both natural and human physical problem. So it's the fail of urban planning is part of the cause of waterlogging. The failed of city management, urban management, the underground water pipeline management is a cause of waterlogging, and also the rapid urban expansions. For example, 100 years ago, all the cities are built in the city center. However, when they expand rapidly, the underground water pipeline may not be able to support this kind of rapid expansion, and no one is having the intention to fix the problem or try to rebuild the whole underground waterlogging system. So this is a big problem that caused what happened in the diagram in my right hand side here. From 2006 to 2016, more increasing number of coastal cities are increasing these vulnerabilities to waterlogging problems or flooding problems. And right now, as we all realize that this type of flooding problems or flooding problems and waterlogging problems will cause the city financially and socially. It damaged the city's development. So one of the proposed is to build a sponge city, which is a very popular idea in the Western countries. So try to use different type of infrastructure, a new infrastructure, and make the city like a sponge to absorb those rain and try to reuse this type of water. In terms of building sponge cities, so we are not talking about how technical it is to build a sponge city. We're talking about how to finance in it. So back to my previous points, that because the cities need to be upgraded and we are facing contemporary problem caused by climate change and rapid urban expansions. So we need money to fund this type of project. So green bonds and infrastructure financing, infrastructure rates, this type of financing is very important to contemporary city building. And as Dr. Ye has suggested before, we have analyzed that how stable it is to invest in, for example, infrastructure rates, and the return for green bonds is actually very attractive. So that's oh, sorry. So that's everything in our what we want to share. So our key point is that currently the urban space is facing lots of problems, and we try to encouraging building the resilient cities, not only for the economy benefits, but also for the benefit of our future generations. And in terms of in order to do that, we need different type of innovative financing vehicles. Thank you. That's it.